I got some more silly season trade targets for you all today for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. One being a top 6 forward / maybe a third line center, and another one being a defenseman, since I do think Kyle Dubas is going to want to change on the back end. That plus much more is coming up for today's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen today. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So let's get right into it, looking at a top 6 winger / a third line center trade option, since this player can play both wing and center. And I continue to look at the Winnipeg Jets. I honestly think the Jets this summer, they got a lot of pieces that they have to make decisions on. Obviously, Connor Hellebuck, Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think he wants to go to Montreal. He has one more year left on his contract. You got Nikolai Ehlers, Kyle Connor, and another player here who I do think makes some sense, even though he only has 1 year left on his contract, is Mark Scheifele. In his 30s now, but he just had another ridiculous year for the Jets. 42 goals, 68 points, make $6.125 million for this next season. If you can get the Jets to maybe retain some money on that deal, that would be awesome. I know he scored 40 goals and had 68 points, but I don't think he's going to cost you as much as, say, maybe like a Kyle Connor would. You know, Connor, I think, is one of the best young goal scorers in this game right now. Scheifele, a bit older, still had a really good season, but you know, do you think he's going to score 40 again next year? Maybe not, but this would still be a pretty big splash if you are Kyle Dubas. He can play center, he can play wing. I mean, he could definitely solve your third line center problem, because the Penguins badly need one heading into next season. And you know, he had a very good season in Winnipeg. Even though Rick Bowness is not really big on offense for his system, he still had a tremendous season for the Jets. And he was on the ice. The Jets had 51% of the shot attempts. They also had about 50% of the actual goals, a little over 50%, I should say. 52% of the scoring chances, about 51% of the high danger chances, and 49% of the expected goal share. He has 8 straight seasons of 20 goals or more. So he is going to put the puck in the back of the net. Great on 5-on-5, can play on the second power play. Maybe he can even kill penalties for you if you need to. But you know, I think the Penguins have other better players who can kill penalties at this point. He is the total package. And again, Winnipeg, I really do think has, honestly, I feel like it's just like a bidding war. All these teams are going to be lining up to trade with the Jets, because I think there's a good chance they blow it up. I mean, I think that the time is now for them to go in another direction, or just, you know, say we're going to rebuild, because they've been kind of stuck in the mud for the last several years. Kevin Cheveldayoff, their general manager, makes some moves, but he's also very inactive as a GM. It's kind of crazy that he's been there since I was in high school. I actually did not know. I forgot about this until a couple of days ago. Him and Jarmo Kekalainen have both been GMs in the league since I've been in high school, and for the same team. I don't understand that. Like, is that like, and they're not even like anyone's kids or something like that. So I don't know how that's possible, but hey, you know, I'm not going to question it. But Scheifele, still a very good player. I know he's a little older, in his 30s. He makes $6.125 million. His numbers could go down, but if you're looking at just this next season for the Penguins, I think it makes a good bit of sense. I think he's going to score a bit more than Jason Zucker would. And I mean, no disrespect to Jason Zucker, who just had a 27-goal season, one of his best seasons of his career. But I think I would rather have Scheifele at $6.125 million for a year than Zucker at whatever, you know, $4.55 million that he's going to ask for on his next deal. And I also do think Zucker could ask for a good chunk of term on his next deal. And I do think there will be some suckers out there who will give it to him. I just don't know if that's going to be Kyle Dubas and company, especially because he didn't acquire Zucker, and I don't think he's really going to be the one to give him what he's looking for. But in terms of this window, it makes sense. You'd have to think about an extension past this season, but he'll be in his early 30s when this deal is up. That will be really his final time that he can sign a big contract in the NHL. So I think he's going to be looking to cash out in general. If I were the Penguins, I would just take him for this season. If you can get him on a discount after that, great. But I would still obviously have Jake Guentzel as your higher priority because they both are making $6 million plus heading into next season in this hypothetical, at least. But he definitely checks a lot of boxes when it comes to me. He has that beautiful wrist shot, great passing ability, fits Mike Sullivan's system to a T, can forecheck hard. I would be very much in favor of getting Scheifele on Winnipeg. And again, I'll say this one more time. I don't really think the price to get him is going to be that much. I mean, I know that sounds weird. You're probably going to think I'm crazy because he just had a 40-goal plus season. But he's going into the final year of his contract. He doesn't have so much term. So you can probably get him for, I think the first round pick for sure, prospect, maybe a roster player. I don't think it's going to be like what Jacob Trickman went for when he went for just draft picks. I think it's going to be a little more than that. But I also don't think you're going to have to pay what you would have to for someone like Ehlers or Connor, where it's probably multiple picks, top prospect, really good roster play. I think it could just be, one of your defensemen that you have, a forward, plus a top prospect. If you can get, and I don't want to say this, if you can maybe get Kevin Cheveldayoff to take Owen Pickering, and I hate saying that because he's our top prospect in the system. I think you do it because, if you look at, some models with how he's projected to be an NHLer, he only ranks in the 16th percentile to even reach the NHL. And I was pretty high on that pick last year, but he didn't really have that good of a season in juniors this year. Maybe his development is, a bit slower compared to others. And obviously sometimes those, some of those, models don't account for that. But I think the time to trade him is now if you're looking at immediate help for this upcoming season. And maybe Cheveldayoff will see that he's a good piece for the rebuild that they are going to go on. He'll say yes to that, plus a roster player, forward, or defenseman, and then maybe, your first round pick. That's what I'm looking at in terms of a trade for Scheifele. But he would score a lot of goals in this system, put up a lot of points. You could rotate him between positions. You're putting him next to Malkin, and Rust, Raquel even, or you putting him up with Sidney Crosby as well would be a lot of fun. And again, you could also just have him be your third line center. If your center, if your top three centers are Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Mark Scheifele, you're doing a pretty good job. Even if it's for just 1 year, right? You're still doing a bang-up job for that. And then your fourth line center, you can figure that out. If that's Ryan Poehling, if that's someone in free agency, Kyle Dubas can figure that out down the road. But I really like Scheifele. He's a player I've always admired in Winnipeg. I think he's been super underrated up there for quite a long time. And I do think that the time is now for the Jets to really consider moving him. And I think a lot of their other pieces, because I think they've gone as far as they can with this core. And it's time for them to go in another direction and try to actually contend, because they're just stuck in a middling spot, to be honest. And you either need to contend or you need to rebuild. You can't just be stuck in this middle. And I think the Jets are going to go toward the latter, which is rebuilding. At least that's, I think the indications I've gotten out of Winnipeg. I mean, I'm not hearing anything, obviously, but indications are just based off some comments, from Rick Bowness. I think Kevin Cheveldayoff, some of the players. I think that some of these players are going to want out if that's the direction that they go in. But that wraps up this first segment, looking into Mark Scheifele. Let me know what you think down in the comments. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also send me a DM. Do you like Mark Scheifele? Do you think it makes sense for just a year? And just let me know what you think. And yes, I do think Dubas will try to retain some money on this deal. It would be nice to have a GM that actually knows how to retain money on trades. I don't think Ron Hextall even knew that was a thing when he was here in Pittsburgh. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to get into a defenseman trade target that has emerged from my head, because this team, I think, is going to have a cap crunch coming this summer. But before we jump into that, we have to discuss Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime is the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you will have. Forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. You can get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. The Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section row for less, they will credit you 110% of the difference. You can download the Gametime app right now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we're back in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter, Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at @Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen today. We are free and available on all platforms. So I keep thinking back to what Kyle Dubas said at his press conference a week ago. It's crazy, it's already been a week. That he wanted to really think about changing up the back end, and I do think he is going to make some changes there, whether it's maybe Jan Ruda going out the door, Jeff Petrie getting traded if you can find a taker on that. And I still think it's more unlikely that he gets traded. Just that contract, $6.25 million for 2 more years. He's in his mid-30s. What team is going to take that on? I know that the free agent defensive market is not that good. You got Orlov, Ryan Graves, a couple others, but I struggle to see a team taking on that full contract. I think the Penguins, if they trade him, they would have to retain some money, or if they even somehow find a taker, they would have to, I think, attach a sweetener for that team. You know, again, I voted the Ducks, maybe the Sharks, some bad Western Conference team, maybe even Chicago. Kyle Davidson was talking about how he's willing to take on bad contracts, and he's already been talking to some teams. Maybe you could get them to take them on, just because the Blackhawks need to reach the cap floor for this upcoming season, and they're going to be really bad. But you know, that's also easier said than done. But this defenseman would play on the left side, would be a Brian Dumoulin replacement, and a target that I think the Penguins should very seriously consider is Matt Grzelcyk of the Boston Bruins. Has a lot of experience playing top 4 minutes, is coming off a ridiculous season for the Bruins. When he was on the ice, the Bruins had 51.4% of the shot attempts, 52% of the scoring chances, 53.5% of the high danger chances, and a ridiculous 69%, nice by the way, 69% of the high danger goals for, 38 high danger goals for, 17 against. He was ridiculous. And you want another stat? When I was on Natural Stat Trick today looking it up, I added this to my notes for the show today. During 5-on-5 play, Matt Grzelcyk, when he was on the ice, he had a 70.7 goals for percentage during 5-on-play. When he was on the ice, the Bruins had over 70% of the actual goals for. Highest among all active defensemen who played over 1,000 minutes this season. That is how good he was in Boston. He's played a lot with Charlie McAvoy. He's played on the second pairing. He can play, with any of the defensemen on the right side, whether it's Jeff Petrie if he stays, if it's someone else they bring in for that spot, or he can play on the top pairing with Grzelcyk, because his numbers with McAvoy have been very good throughout his career. He has 1 more year left on his contract, a little under $4 million per season. Actually, it's a little less than $3.7 million. Again, can easily slide into a top 4 role to play in Dumo's spot. And as I have said, the Bruins, the big one, they have a huge cap crunch coming. They have to make a decision on their goaltending situation. What's going to happen with Jeremy Swayman? Are you going to move on from Linus Ullmark? Patrice Bergeron, is he going to come back? He'll sign probably for cheap, just because that's just how he is. He's only signed for $2.5 million this past season, but you still need to figure out how you're going to put the team around him. Is Taylor Hall going to stay? What about Brandon Carl? That's another target. If the Penguins do trade Jeff Petrie Brandon Carlo is someone I think to monitor for his spot, and I'll get into him a little later on, maybe next week or the week after, as we can continue to do some silly season stuff. But Grzelcyk is awesome. He also, again, only has one more year left, so you would have to make a decision on it after the season, but you punt that until after. A lot of these players that I've discussed these past couple of days, whether it's the goalie market, the defensive market, or the forward market, they have contracts with only a year left on it. You can punt that decision. Heck, Dubas might punt the Jake Guentzel decision to next year, and I have more on that coming up after this break for this segment. But this is what you do when you're in win now mode. You don't want to worry about those contracts. That's one thing that I think Ron Hextall really failed at doing, especially with the Jeff Carter extension. He just thought of, I got to sign him right away just because he's playing well, but he didn't think of the aging curve and how he could fall off at any time. And now the Penguins are stuck with that contract for another year. It's different with someone like Guentzel or some of these other players I've discussed because they're not as old as Carter is. But still, you don't want to make a decision that could handcuff the team down the road. Another one, as I've said, Jeff Petrie. He makes a ridiculous amount of money. He's going to be the second high. Right now, he is the second highest paid player on the team going into next season, only behind Sidney Crosby. That's a problem. Whole discussion for another day, but that is a problem. But Grzelcyk, I know he's a bit small, below 6 feet. I know people like size in their defenders, and I totally get that. But he is great at moving the puck up the ice, has a great first pass. It just, his vision on the ice is tremendous. Good offensive ability, had almost 30 points this season, can clean up anyone's mistakes in the defensive zone, can play on the second power play unit, can kill penalties. He is an all-around great top 4 defenseman. And, again, he brings an element to this D-core that I don't think they have enough of, which is more offense. Had almost 30 points this past season. 4 of them were goals. When I look at the D-core right now, outside of Chris Letang and maybe Jeff Petrie to a T, I don't see many other defensemen who bring a lot of consistent offense on a nightly basis. P.O. Joseph, you can put in there. I think he did bring a decent amount of offense this past season. It was his defensive play where he gave it back. But even Petrie a lot of times this season wasn't up to par from how he played in Montreal. Pettersson's your defensive guy, that's good. Ruhwedel's your defensive guy, that's fine. Jan Ruda's your defensive guy, that's fine. But I still want another defenseman or two maybe who can bring more offense to the table, so it's not just mostly Chris Letang and a little bit of P.O. Joseph and also a little bit of Jeff Petrie bringing you your offense on an every night basis. Because again, most of it is Tanger. Well, let's be real here. He has most of his seasons, he's had over 40 plus points, 50 plus, had some over 60 plus, even has one where he has, I believe, 70 plus points in a season. And Grzelcyk, I'm not saying he's going to get 50 to 70 points with this team, but I do think he has the ability to get, 30, 35 points in a season for the Penguins. I don't think the cost to acquire him is going to be that much, especially if the Bruins are in a cap crunch, a couple of assets. I think that's what you're looking at, but I'm a big fan of his game. He has been awesome for the Bruins these past several years, ever since he came into the league. Honestly, I am a big fan of him and just his overall ability on the ice. I think he would also fit Mike Sullivan's system to a T. So these couple of trade options are just 2 that I've really thought of over the past couple of days when I've been planning out my shows, for the past couple of days, at least for here with the goalie market, and then a couple more silly season stuff. Let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments. You can also send me DMs on social media if you're there. What do you think of Matt Grzelcyk? Do you think he'll be a good fit for the Penguins? What would you give up to get him? And are you concerned at all that he only has one more year left on his contract? So that's that segment. Coming up to end the show, we are going to get into Cole Caulfield's extension and whether he truly set the bar for Jake Guentzel, because he only has one more year left on his contract at $6 million per. We're going to get into that. But before we discuss that, we do have to get into Birddogs. They are shorts that make you look good. They stretch khaki shorts, and they are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. They also do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They also fit way better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. Birddogs They fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but it stretches so you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Birddogs also use anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that keep you cool and dry all day long. You can go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL and you can enter promo code LockedOnNHL for a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL for a free Yeti style tumbler. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you that. All right, I'm back in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at NLS Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. So earlier in this week, we saw Cole Caulfield get a big extension from the Montreal Canadiens, 8-year term, over $7.5 million per season. I believe the total AAV was 7.85. And this is for a player who has only a couple seasons to his name. His highest goal total is 26. You look at his overall numbers. He's played 123 career games, 84 points in those games. Good production, but 8 years times over 7.8 million. That's a lot. That is a high ticket, but the Canadiens, they are betting that he is going to be a star for them. And I'm fine with them locking him up long-term, while he is still in the peak years of his career. And when I saw that extension, I was like, okay, this begs the question, what is Jake Guentzel going to be looking for in his next deal? Because you look at Jake's stats, and I know he's been in the league a lot longer. I understand that. But they are, a lot better. 2 40-goal seasons, 3 30-plus goal seasons, 1 season of 80-plus points, 3 seasons of 70-plus points for his career. 453 overall games, 414 points, almost a point per game player this past season. 73 points in 78 games. Before that, 84 points in 76 games. Before that, 57 and 56. He has been a point per game player for the last 5 seasons, basically. After his first couple of seasons, he really made his mark in the NHL. And that begs the question, what is he looking for in his next deal? If you're asking me, if they want to do it this summer, which I don't know if Dubas has any plans to extend Guentzel right now, he's obviously going to get max term, 8 years. And I think you're looking at least an AAV of $8 million. And I think based on this Caulfield extension, you could even argue maybe 8.5 to 9 million per. Why not? Jay could easily go to his agent right now and say, I deserve 8.5 to 9 million per if Caulfield's getting almost 8 million per season. Based on the production that he has had in the first couple of seasons of his career compared to what Guentzel has done. With almost, he's 86 points away from 500. Heck, Guentzel may break that next season. So that's really interesting to think about. If I am Dubas, and this is just my personal opinion, I wait until after the season to start the contract negotiations with Guentzel. Obviously, I'm keeping him. I would not want him to walk because he's going to be here, I think, long after Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Crystal Tang stop playing. But I just don't think you're really going to want that distraction in quotation marks that maybe people think happened during the regular season. Some GMs negotiate during the season, some don't. We'll have to see where Dubas stands with this one. But I would want to see how he does this year. If he does have another really good season and beats out the production he had this year, then his price tag goes up, which I think is still fine. But I'm still punting that extension until after the season because you will have plenty of opportunities to sign him. That negotiation should honestly not take that long. Heck, when the prior regime signed Rickard Rakell and Brian Russ that last offseason, those deals came together fairly quickly, especially because the team was out in the first round. Heck, the Brian Russ deal came, I believe, during the second, third round of the playoffs. So it's definitely something to monitor. I do think Jake, should and will ask for more than what Caulfield got, because he's one of the, I think at his peak, he's one of the 5 to 6, 7 best pure goal scorers in the league. I would die on that hill. And just based off his production alone, he may push for $9 million per. I don't know if he truly will, but just based off his production, I think he's more than qualified to ask for that kind of money. Let me know what you think about this. Do you think that Guentzel will ask for that kind of money on his next contract? Do you think he deserves that kind of money for his next contract? Because it's going to be a whopper no matter what, people. Like $6 million right now, that is a flat out steal for Jake. No question. This next one, though, he's going to be paid, and he is going to be paid handsomely. But that'll do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Really appreciate all of you listening / watching. On Friday, I will have Jesse Marshall from The Athletic on the show to discuss the Kyle Dubas hire, all the silly season stuff from the offseason. It's going to be a really good show. Look at some free agents, look at some trade options, who Dubas could go after. All that plus so much more is coming up on the Friday edition for Locked On Penguins. So again, thank you all so much for tuning in. I very much appreciate it. I'll be back with another episode for you all on Friday.